Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
Right, well this is going to be the last review before Christmas, so Scholars of the South Tigris just about arrived in time. I mean, yes, TTS was available, Tabletop Simulator, for playing some solo games, but in order to get this played multiplayer, I needed more often to get it out like properly with the components and everything, and thankfully, despite the UK being, well, the UK, Brexit, was able to get it in time to start playing and get this one reviewed. And so it's no surprise that I do like a lot of Garfield Games stuff. Not all their games. I mean, Explorers of the North Sea I found average. That was kind of average. Not played Shipwrights, though I did back the new version, so we'll see if that's any good. Raiders of the North Sea, really great game, really does need both expansions, or at least the first expansion to be truly great though. Its base form is a little bit sort of, bare bones, kind of like vanilla. But I really love Architects. Architects is just great, works with a lot of players, very simple. Gets a bit bloated with both expansions. I recommend maybe just sticking to the first expansion, but I've got both, so it's the way it is. Paladins, I liked it more at first, but the chinks in the armor and the repetition started setting in quite quick. Although I've not played it with the expansion, I hear that helps. I would like to try that again with the expansion, but Paladins is quite low on the level for me, and I know some people love it to death. Let's see, what else? Viscounts of the West Kingdom, really enjoy that one. It's kind of like on par with Architects, love the whole rondel thing and 4 different very distinct strategies and the clever card play, that one just really sings to me. And Wayfarers, love that one too. I was about to say open world, but like open sandbox style Euro game where I got all these different paths I can follow, all these different options on a turn, all these different things. Love Wayfarers. I mean, that one actually could be going up above Architects and Viscounts to me at this rate. It really is down to that. So Scholars, naturally, I was excited to see whether it could continue the trend that Wayfarers has started to be a solid, a solid trilogy, because I didn't like Explorers much, and Paladins I've kind of gone meh on. So there's always been one bad apple for me. I say bad, none of these games are bad, but there's always been one lesser apple in the bunch for these trilogies. I want the Tigris trilogy to be all good. I want all 3 games to be ones that I can recommend. So the question is, has Scholars managed to continue the trend, or much like Paladins, being the second one in the West Kingdom trilogy, has it somewhat put a bit of a stopper in the works? So Scholars of the South Tigris is all about translating scripts from one language down to Arabic, but how you get there is up to you. You will need to employ the use of these different translators, and they know different languages. So we got Hebrew to Persian, we got Greek to Syriac, Hebrew to Syriac, you can get Sanskrit, you can get Chinese, there's several other languages present.
Does anybody understand what this duck is saying?
And the idea is that these translators have to be able to get a script, which is consistent from these little cards that you can acquire during the game. Like this one, for example, is a Syriac script. But what happens is that you have to basically take the script and then use whatever translators are necessary to translate from the original language, in this case Syriac, down to Arabic. It may require the use of more than one translator, but that's how you essentially translate the script and make it eligible for in-game scoring.
Tiny misunderstanding still. My hopes weren't high.
Players on their turn will have a selection of dice, typically white, but there are other colours as well, possibly the use of a couple of colour meeples, and a selection of action cards. On your turn, you essentially have this board here with different actions below that can be upgraded through the use of retired translators during the game. Now, what you do is that you place one of these cards. Let's say I'll place this one down, and I want to employ another translator. So I place it down on here, and I have to use dice in order to trigger the action. The different actions around the board not only require sometimes a value of a die, so if I roll these dice I get a 6 and a 3. Well, maybe I need a 6 to get the particular translator I want. A 3's not enough. I might need to boost it up with the use of a meeple, for example. But this game is all about color mixing. So you've got these different columns here that have the 6 colors that are necessary. 3 primary, 3 secondary colors. So blue, green, yellow, orange, red, purple. And the idea is that, let's say, if I want to employ an advisor, I don't care about color. So I just need 6 die, place it on the card, get the person I want. So say that's the person, great. And then I put it down here at the bottom of the board for use later. But let's say I want to level up on one of these tracks here, one of these, like, effectively the technology tracks, best way to say it. So, okay, I want to level up on purple. Well, let's see, in order to make purple, I don't have a purple meeple and a purple die, so I need to make purple. Well, red and blue make purple. Well, let's see. I mean, let's say this is one of my dice I have. Okay, well, I have a 6 red, and I have a blue meeple. Okay, so if I put a 6 red and a single white die just to mix with the color blue, say with the meeple, with the combination of red and blue, I have made a purple action. And with the purple action, I can now level up on this track as one of the available things I can do. This works for a lot of other actions as well. Like, for example, moving around this little map board rondelle will get you bonuses if you have the right color when you go across the path. When you when you translate a script from here, the towers over here are purple, orange, and green, the 3 secondary colors. So you have to basically mix the actions and dice and meeples together in order to make the color of the pillar of the thing that you want to translate. So there's a little bit of manipulation required from essentially 2 different main resources, the dice and the meeples. There may be some other little bonuses you've got that can manipulate the colors as well, but primarily it's different colors of meeple, different colors of dice. And with these actions, you have to find a way to not only get the scripts over to these pillars in order to be able to translate them later, they call it the House of Wisdom effectively, but also then translate them from here using your advisors that have been employed by all the players to get it translated from its original language down to Arabic. Sounds a little bit more complicated than it actually is, but it's essentially a game where everybody is utilizing a kind of like a shared pool of resources available, because other players can use other people's translators. It's not necessarily yours. I've employed it, but then somebody else might use it. That's great, because once they've worked a certain number of times, they retire and go underneath your board as essentially a boost to the action. It's a bit like the apprentices that you had in Architects and similar. So now when I do this action, I get an extra blue die when I do it. And then once you want to rest, you take all your cards back, and much like Wayfarers, where when you rested in there and you got bonuses, same thing here. Anything with a blue banner at the bottom gets you that rest bonus, and you might be covering them up with other cards. These rest bonuses will let you gain income from these various tracks in the middle, the technology tracks, and you just keep going forth and forth until eventually some bonus scoring cards are revealed from the giant deck of scrolls, and once the 4th one is revealed, top up the endgame scoring, and the one with the most.
What am I, psychic?
Components wise, this is actually a good visual spectacle on the board. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of browns and that on the board, but because this game is so obsessed with color in more ways than one, everybody having their own color bag, all these different color meeples, all the different dice, green, red, purple, blue, translucent ones, you've got all these different lovely colors here.
Taste the rainbow.
All the different meeples, all the different cards. There's a lot here going for the production quality being the usual fare for a Garfield game. Very well produced with a lot of wood pieces and a lot of other components on the side. The insert, I was a bit hard on it at first, but I've kind of warmed up on it a bit more. The insert in here is now what these bigger boxes are generally having, and this insert is not bad. I mean, you can hold everything in there pretty well. With the downside that even though I can hold sleeve stuff in here, you still have these tiny little cubby holds for the influence and player stuff, so you have to kind of fish them out with your fingers before you start a game. That can get a little annoying, and woe betide you if you decide to want to store this vertically. Had a good idea. No, 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 no. Even when you've got boards and that in here, you store this horizontal or not at all. It's essentially the advice I would give you. Scholars is definitely one of the meatier games that they have put out in terms of figuring out how to do well. It's not that it's very heavyweight. I mean, some people try to compare this to the same weight level as the Lacerda. That's nonsense. No, if I'm going to compare this weight level to something, you're probably talking on par with something like, say, Paladins and Wayfarers. It's definitely on the upper echelon of the weight level, but a lot of that is down to how to do well. The actions themselves are not actually that complicated, although more on that in a minute, but in terms of how to get from A to B to C and actually get the point scoring, that requires a little bit more forward planning, a little bit more attention to detail, and a little bit more manipulation of the resources, which are quite tight. You're not going to be swimming in dice each round. You're certainly not going to be swimming in the different colors of them, and you're definitely not going to be swimming in meeples of different colors. You can get whites easily enough, but all they do is boost white dice. White dice are generic. You want to get specific colors for certain actions, you need to work at getting the stuff for them, and that that takes some planning and some work to go along do it. Now, that is all a good thing, because this does make for a good, rich, meaty experience. You know, I enjoy the decision I've got to make with these action cards, because the income at the bottom is different. So if I'm really focusing on certain tracks, these are the ones I want to play, but I need to be able to actually play them if I'm going to get income from them, because otherwise when I rest, they don't trigger. But it's not just simply that. It's like, well, you know, which action can I do? Well, I can only do each action once before I rest, with the exception of a couple that you have to effectively unlock or forego other rest bonuses to do. So there's little decisions like that, and that's on top of the whole thing of mixing the colors and trying to get the right. Damn it, I need a purple for this. Hang on, I've only got blue. Where can I get a red thing from? Well, hang on, if I dismiss this advisor here, I can get a red card there. Let's see, you know, because you have these ones on here. I might be like, oh, I need to level up on this track a bit more, and it's like, ooh, if I dismiss this one, if I cash in my white meeple, that levels up on that track. Sweet. And these little opportunities come out throughout the game, and they're good, rewarding opportunities. You know, there is crux here to do quite well, build some really cool combos, build a really nice engine, but also some tactical variety where a script may come out with some endgame scoring that's like, ooh, that suits me, or it levels up on the track that you're interested in. It's like, ooh, that suits me. Or even just the advisors, you know, somebody takes the top one here and then the one below it's got a bonus on it that's like, ooh, that's pretty good as well. And so you can adapt to these things. Now, that being said, one slight negative I will say is that this game does not hold your hand.
Oh God, you're killing me!
No, if you start off badly in this, you are going to kind of be on the back foot to a few other players, and you know, certainly it's not so much rich get richer, but it's just that if you don't start off well, you're gonna struggle to get what you need to do the various actions. And there have been times where a few people can get frustrated on the basis that they know exactly what they want to do, they want to get that script and they want to translate it with these two people. Problem is, they're short by 1 gold, or they don't have the means to make green, all that kind of thing, and it can frustrate a few players, but that's the nature of the beast. This is definitely not a gateway game. Well, none of them are gateway games, but you know, this is not light. This is not one of the games that I would say, oh, this is your introduction to Garfield games, is it? Right, scholars. No. Play something like Architects or Raiders for that kind of thing. This one is more for fans of the series. You're already into Garfield games, you'll get a lot of this iconography, go for it, try it. The game also boasts a nice amount of interaction, but not too much, and not necessarily direct. You're not playing cards to completely screw over other people, but as I mentioned, this stuff is shared among players. You're not building up your own personal tableau of scripts until they are translated. When they're on this map board here, when they're on this thing here, when the advisors are down here at the bottom to be used, they're anybody's fair game at that point. So somebody might take a script from here and place it in the House of Wisdom for you. Fantastic, I was interested in that one again. But wait, that means you're in competition with me. Uh-oh. And so you're thinking, well, when are they going to translate? Next turn? Have they got the resources to do it? No, they need the red first. Okay, can I do it? Well, how can I beat them to it? It's like, and there's a lot of these little mini races you got to consider. But even then, the biggest part of the interaction is these translators, because they're at the bottom of the board and they're essentially there saying, right, people know what language can translate to what. And just because it's your translator that you employed, yes, you'll get a little bonus of some silver coins if somebody uses it, great. And they can retire it for you, but you might have wanted to use that translator to translate a script. Somebody else comes along and translates a different one, utilizing your person, which then retires it. You might not have wanted to retire at that point. You know, you need to be mindful of these things.
Demand suddenly skyrocketed. You all saw it.
This actually does a better job than a lot of Euro games at simulating a decent amount of interaction where I care about the other players. The game length can certainly go a little bit long when you put in lots of players, but it's not too much compared to others. I don't feel this one drags out too long even with 4, and it just means that I'm paying attention to the others. You know, they are there. I want to know what they're doing. I want to know what resources they've got. Can they interfere with my plans? It's not a solitaire game in any way. Solo in this is also particularly good. You have a solo AI that doesn't have different personalities per se, but you do have 4 tailorable difficulties that you can use. Certainly, I think you're going to need to play on a minimum of level 2 to get even a sort of remote challenge here. Level 1 you should always win, but it's a good learning experience. 3 and 4, it does rank up the challenge quite a bit of those. But the the idea with this is that it's a very simple AI. I kid you not, this is all it is. You essentially have 6 AI scheme cards, of which you place them on there, and then on the turn, you flip the AI scheme over. It tells you whether it wants to employ an advisor or translate a script, and if it can, it will. If it doesn't, it does this secondary thing on the card, which usually means delivering a script or getting some resource or some other benefit. And that's pretty much what they do. They flip these cards. When they get 3 of the same color, they will choose to rest. But other than that, most of their stuff is that they don't collect resources per se. They just have it available, or it levels them up on tracks. And they're sort of, what you call, their priority for what they do, like which cards are they going after, is all dictated by this little banner up here where a marker moves along and tells you at any particular time they are focusing on Chinese scripts or purple colors or the like. Or maybe over here they're now focusing on Persian employers and orange stuff, you know, and it's quite clear how that works. Now the solo mode is not foolproof. We'll get onto one of the slight issues I have with the game in general that does affect solo mode a bit later. But honestly, this is one of the more, once you get the rules down, it's one of the more easier to pilot AIs I've seen for any of the Garfield games series. And it does a good job at simulating a multiplayer opponent, because this opponent is going to really race you for these translations and for these employers and that. And so you've got to be paying attention to what it can do. You can manipulate it to an extent by putting stuff in certain places where you know, oh, it's going to focus on this rather than this. So there's an element of what you can do to kind of coax it along. But for the most part, you've got to get your engine up and running, you know, in time so that the AI does not completely overwhelm you. It's a pretty cool system, and I've enjoyed a lot of plays of this on Tabletop Simulator and in the person mode to play solo. It's a solid one. We'll get onto the rule set a little bit later, but I do want to mention a little neat trick they use with these goal cards. You have essentially these short-term early game objectives that you can do in order to unlock more meeples, more dice, and flip it to an upgraded action card. These are really cool. There's not that many of them, and they are somewhat fixed in what they do, but it's great for new players and veterans alike to say, right, what am I going to do at this stage of the game? Well, you know, I've got this thing here that says I should go for green pillar scripts and Chinese translators and the purple track for income. It's like, well, I should probably start doing that then. Well, how can I do this? And it just gives people a little guide as to what to do. I mean, they're fantastic for new players, but even if you know what you're doing, it's still recommended to go and focus on those little early game goals. And I like it when games do that. They throw in this little thing to say, look, you don't have to do this, but it is recommended. But you know what? If you need a guide, here it is, do this first.
How hard can it be?
The game is 60 to 90 minutes on the max, 1 to 4 players, and I do admit it doesn't drag out too long with 4 players, but the game length is kind of variable because the game length is dictated entirely by 4 scorecards essentially coming out. They call them Caliph cards, coming out of the deck and resolving. That depends a lot on how fast the players gun through the scroll deck, because, you know, delivering new scripts and putting them over here and translating them quickly is what's going to accelerate that deck. The deck doesn't accelerate by itself. Players have to actively push it along. So if players are struggling to get like stuff done, or if they're taking it a little bit slower and focusing on other aspects, you may find the game can drag out just that tiny little bit too long in those circumstances. But usually if at least 1 or 2 players kind of know what they're doing or are getting scripts, then the game will accelerate to a point. You know, certainly in the solo mode, it will kind of go at its own pace because the AI is going to deliver stuff on a fairly regular basis, but players are not quite as predictable as an AI can be, so you have to bear in mind that the game length is not too long. I mean, it's still probably not going to take you longer than 2 hours to finish a 4-player game when you're kind of used to what you're doing, which is a decent length for something like this, but it is variable, so it is very difficult to gauge how long it's going to take. Now, one of the negatives that does affect this game is the rules themselves. The rules are not terribly complicated, but Garfield Games rulebooks do vary a little bit in terms of how well they're laid out and how easy it is to reference stuff. This one is not too bad for the most part, but there's a couple of things that get in the way. The layout could be better. I mean, there's not a huge amount of pictorial representation in here. Most of it is text, and it does make it a little bit hard on the eyes to read. There is also a smorgasbord of iconography in this game, which is a little bit different from what you've seen in Garfield Games' normal fares, because they're dealing with the whole mixing of colors and stuff like that, which is not commonplace to a lot of Garfield Games stuff, but you will eventually get used to it. The main kind of issue I have with this though is that there's a lot of little micro rules in the game where, you know, when you do something, remember that you have to do this. Or when you like get your dice back, remember that you top up to a hand size, you don't draw this many out of the bag. You know, and remember when you deliver a script, you get to level up on the tech track. Also, when you translate the script, you also get to do that. Little rules like that are present throughout this game, and there isn't enough reminders on either the reference cards or an easy like reach on the board. You know, there's some space on the board that they could have easily put some little aids like that on to remind you those are a thing.
1, 2, 5. 3.
The variety in this game is also a little bit on the stilted side. It's not like too constrained, but there's mostly just little variations of like the endgame scoring that you can get on these scripts. You know, there's like 3 or 4 different types that you'll get, and then they just tweak it. Oh, it's the green track for this one, it's the yellow for this one, it's the purple for this one, that kind of thing. The advisors do have a decent amount of variety in the dismiss abilities, but you know, that's only a minor thing. The map icons around the side, this doesn't change. These pillars, the way they work, that doesn't change. You know, the advisors when they're down here, these bonuses will remain the same each game. And the technology tracks, yes, there's 6 of them, although you're only really going to focus on, say, 2 or 3 during the game, and you know, that's only going to change so much as well. This one is definitely more constrained than the other the other Garfield games in general. I mean, Architects, you can do all sorts with those apprentices. You know, with Viscounts, you've got 4 very distinct different paths to victory that you can follow in that one, and then there's variations on top of that, especially with expansions that have come out. And Wayfarers, I mean, the variety of that game and the amount of options you have is insane. Here, you don't have quite as many options on a turn to do, particularly as you're tight with the resources, and the paths aren't necessarily as varied. Not to say that it's completely one note, but it's just not quite as open. The learning curve of this game is also quite high because of the idea of the colour mixing, which can throw off some players. Now, let's look at other Euro games in particular. Most of the time we're concerned with the value. So when I get dice, I want to know what value that die is. Okay, fine. Sometimes you want to know what colour it is, but it's just what colour it is. Like, no other weirdness with it. It's like, this is a red die. Do I have a red die? No. Okay, I can't just make a red die. In other games, it may be a resource, like I need a food or I need an iron or something to do whatever I need to do. Here, the idea that I've got to go, right, hang on a minute, so I need a red die, I need a yellow die, hang on, that makes orange, so maybe if I take a white die and use a blue, I can make purple instead. And colour mixing is not as inherent to people as, say, like values and just single colours.
The color of gold is gold. That's why it's called gold. What you have discovered, if it has a name, is some green.
It took me a little bit to remember sometimes what the colours were, although you can just look at the board and they do have a nice like chart on the back of the rule book which basically has the colour wheel, and you just look at the 2 sides and they make this. I know it sounds like, you know, bare bone GCSE art stuff, but you'd be surprised. I mean, you know, most people don't have to worry about what colours make what in real life with their day jobs. So the idea that this board game now wants you to focus entirely on it does certainly jog a few revision memories. So Garfield Games, I do believe, has got another decent solid hit on their hands with Scholars. I don't think it quite measures up to my favourites from the Garfield series, but it's definitely kind of fending for, say, a 4th place, a 3rd, 4th place maybe, which is not to say that this is bad. I mean, Garfield Games are on a pretty high benchmark when it comes to their games for me. They just seem to, they get that good blend of meaty Euro-ness, but with not too complicated rules, not too like crazy lengths of time played, but also getting a nice level of Euro interaction in their games. Not direct interaction per se, but the fact that I care what other players are doing. I mean, in Viscounts, I care whether you're gonna come to my space or build on my spots or jostle me for the castle thing. In Architects, you're arresting each other people's meeples and sticking them in prison. Wayfarers, you've got the meeples you put on the cards and people influencing stuff and racing along the journal track. You know, there are reasons why I care what others are doing, and this is no exception, because utilizing a shared kind of pool of scripts and translators does mean that you're doing lots of little mini races with other players. That stuff is always good and I enjoy that. But even just the combo building side of this, you know, where I've got to go, right, I need to build up this little engine. I need the translators down here. I need a way to get these particular colors. I'm focusing a lot on red and purple. Right, well, I'm going to need a lot of red for a kickoff. I'm going to need some blue. I can probably ignore yellow. Right, well, how can I get red and blue easily? Well, I can dismiss them. I can do this script. I could use this bonus. I could retire this translator. Oh, this translator gets me a red meeple or a red die every time I use it. Well, okay, I'm going to upgrade my map moving abilities. So every time I deliver a script, I also get a red meeple. You know, that sort of stuff is just good, fulfilling, and it's a very unique form of resource management, having to manipulate like dice and meeples and combine them to make the actions that you need. It's a bit of a learning curve, and the rulebook could have been a bit better, but there are resources on the internet to help with this, although you don't get brownie points for somebody else fixing your problems. But just to say that the stuff is there if you need it, but with good production quality as well, and just a decent amount of, thinkiness within, Scholars is another solid game. Where do I rank it? Probably, I think this could actually overtake Raiders for me. Raiders I haven't played in a while. This could actually overtake that to be my 4th favorite, but I don't quite see it. Maybe we'll have to more plays, but I don't quite see it getting to the levels of Architects and Viscounts, and certainly it's nowhere near Wayfarers for me. So this is still solid, just not quite up there. But then bearing in mind, Wayfarers, Architects, Viscounts, they're games I've given 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10s to. Those are seal of distinction level games. This one though, still really solid, and I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. It's getting a seal of endorsement, not quite distinction level, but maybe in the future it could increase to that, I don't know. But for now, I do really enjoy this, and I do think it's another great hit from them. I would definitely play this over, say, Paladins or Explorers or, the original shipwrights, but would I play it over Raiders? It's justling, because both of them are kind of rated about the same in terms of rating, but yeah, I wasn't certain what to make of this one because of its sort of fairly dryish theme and the fact that it was definitely less open than Wayfarers was. But yeah, we've got Wayfarers and we've got Scholars. 2 solid games in the Tigris trilogy. We can only hope that Inventors of the South Tigris lives up to the trilogy and ended up being a good game in itself. But that's a story for another time. But for now, 8 out of 10, I can highly recommend Scholars as another solid Garfield game if you are a fan of the series. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the site. Let's get those thumbs in and get it into the hot review section, please, pretty please. Don't forget to check out all the other reviews I've been doing since Essen. I have been loaded with reviews to do. This is the last one before Christmas, thank God. I can actually focus on other stuff now. And yeah, there's some more Essen stuff I haven't reviewed yet, but that stuff can wait, or I'll talk about it briefly. And you'll have already seen my rest of Essen video where I did kind of the other stragglers that fell behind. So I feel like I've caught up with the vast majority of stuff now, with a couple more that I'll deal with in the new year. But of course it won't be the last video before Christmas, because the last one will be the top 10 of 2023. That video is going to come out shortly this week, so by all means check it out. Could Scholars factor on that list? You'll have to see. Until next time, remember as always, regardless if you can remember what Skittles make a rainbow, it's still only a game, so bye for now.